I have good news for you. The sun is shining, the soil is warming. That means it's bulb time. But I'm not talking about this kind of bulb. I'm talking about spring planted bulbs. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on these amazing plants that are super easy to grow. So I'm going to tell you about some of my favorite bulbs to plant in spring. Hi there, I'm Erin, the Impatient Gardener. I live and garden in southeastern Wisconsin, Zone 6A, and I love me some spring bulbs. I'm taking some liberties with the use of the word bulb because I'm also talking about corms and tubers. All of these are these amazing little underground plant vessels that has everything that plant needs to grow right there in that little wonderful, easy to plant package. And there's a whole bunch of these. One of them that I've done about 1 million videos on because I am absolutely fascinated with this plant are dahlias. Dahlias, of course, are tubers, and they certainly fall under this category. But we've already talked about dahlias a bunch, so let's talk about all the other ones that you might be missing out on. And the first one I want to talk about is lilies, because lilies are as easy to grow as any daffodil or tulip, but are so beautiful and exotic looking in the garden. There are all kinds of varieties. Asiatics tend to have really wild colors. Oriental lilies have an amazing scent that you will absolutely smell throughout the garden. All of them are very beautiful. Lily bulbs are kind of interesting because they have scales on the outside of them. Think of it as like a deconstructing onion, sort of. It's that same kind of method of growth within a bulb. And these should be planted in early spring. You can also plant these in early fall, but that's better done in warmer zones. In cooler zones, you can get into a little bit of trouble with that. Lilies want full sun and good drainage, which can be said of many of these plants. A lot of times that is a hallmark of these bulbs. Bulbs often want good drainage because they're kind of fleshy, and so if they sit there in a bunch of wet, they can easily rot. You can definitely push lilies into a part sun situation as well. Simply pick your spot for them and plant them in the ground about 6 inches deep, and that depth will help them make it through winter. You can also mulch those areas a little bit too if you need to. I like to plant them in groupings of many bulbs because a single lily bulb doesn't do a lot. And lilies will bulk up over the years, so you can go in there and divide them in future years as well. Poor gladiolus. They are often thought of this outdated, old-fashioned flower, but they are so cool, and there are so many new ones coming out. So the traditional gladiolus that we all think of blooms on a long stalk with big flowers all along its length. It makes it perfect for cut flowers. I also happen to think they are beautiful in the garden as well. And they come in a wide range of really interesting and kind of wild colors. And the flowers on some of those are so big and so bold, it is quite a statement. But there are also dwarf gladiolus that only grow to like 20 inches and have smaller flowers that might be more to some people's liking. Now, these types of gladiolus are only hardy to zone 7. So while you can grow them in colder zones, you're going to either have to treat them as an annual, which is what I do, or you're going to have to lift them and store them. I think it's just easiest to grow them. As alliums, but you certainly have some options with that. But there is also a variety of gladiolus that is hardier. These are often sold as hardy gladiolus, and they are sort of borderline hardy in zone 5. I've had them come back on occasion, and sometimes they just don't. It seems to depend on the winter. But again, worth growing even if you're growing them as an annual. But I actually like these more because the flowers in these, and some people call these species gladiolus, the flowers are much different. They're not all along the stem. They're usually at the ends. They're a little bit more elegant, a little bit less in your face. And I think they work much better as garden plants because of that. They only grow 20 to 28 inches tall, so they're pretty short. So they fit in well as an accent in the border. The gladiolus want warm soil, so you really can't plant them until the soil is 55 degrees or so, but once you hit that temperature, then you're free to get going on them. So think about planting these in succession. Every 2 weeks, plant a few more of them. That way you're going to have a longer period of flowering, and if you do like to use them in bouquets, you'll have a lot more opportunities for that as well. They are super easy. To plant. So the corms are kind of flat and disc shaped. And you'll see they have a little like root plate on the bottom and a slight point on the top. A lot of times when you get them though, they will already be sprouting. They seem to be eager to go usually when you buy them. So like you can tell these are raring to go. I like to plant some of these in the raised bed vegetable garden in the cut flower area because that way I will just use them for cutting. But I have planted them in the garden as well. The thing to know though is that they can get a little floppy. So one thing you can do to prevent the flop and provide a little bit more support is to plant them about 6 inches deep. 4 to 6 inches is the general range. If you plant them a little bit deeper, there's going to be a little bit more stem in the ground, which should help hold them up. And of course, you can always stake these in some way, or you can plant a large grouping of them so they sort of all lean into each other. Those are all plants that you've probably heard of, or at least know a little something about. But there are some really interesting ones that you might not be familiar with. And one of those is one that I just discovered last year, and it is called summer hyacinth. And this is for me quite a late bloomer, like end of summer hyacinth, you could maybe call it. But it has very sword-like foliage, very similar to an iris that precedes it. And that foliage is actually very pretty. Last year I grew them in a container as a little bit of an accent, and it was holding its own as a foliage plant until we got flowers. Once we got flowers, oh my gosh, I was not prepared for the show. The flower stems get huge, up to 3 feet tall, I would say, with big, almost bell-shaped white flowers hanging from them. I mean, it's sort of even the shape of like a bluebell type of flower, but they are white and they're huge and they're wonderful. Now, I did have some flopping issues with some of those, so maybe a little bit of staking, or better yet, growing them up between something that'll provide just a little bit of support for them would be good. But either way, a really cool plant to, but either way, a very cool plant to be growing in the garden that I did not know about, and now is a must grow for me. This is not hardy for me, so once again, this is something that I grow as an annual. Now this is a bit of a late bloomer and one that kind of thrives on some heat. So I actually plant these into pots ahead of time. I sort of treat them the same way I treat my dahlias. So I start growing them in pots to get them a head start. I will keep those pots inside because it takes a while for them to get going. So you don't really need a lot of light. What you just need is warmth in the beginning. Sometimes I will put those into my seasonal greenhouse as well to grow those on. And then I just transplant those into the garden or into a pot wherever I'm going to be growing them. That would usually be at the end of May or June in my area. And they just keep on growing with that beautiful foliage. And then later on, they give you that amazing flower show. Something that's kind of similar to that is Peacock orchid, which used to be called Acidenthera. Now it is been reclassified as a Gladiolus. But I grow these in the same way. These get really nice, again, sort of iris type foliage that persists and looks nice. And then the flowers that come up are these really delicate, probably 2-inch white flowers with this deep, dark maroon throat, and they are absolutely gorgeous in the garden. This is another one that I like to get started early, because if I planted these directly into the ground in my garden, they would be blooming really quite late. So in order to get them a head start, I also plant these in pots ahead of time and do the same thing I do with that summer hyacinth. For these, I plant multiples in a pot, and what I like to do with these, and I just keep these growing in the pot for quite a long time until I find a little hole in the garden where I might need to tuck something in, or a spot where I really want that white accent, or a container wherever it's going to go. But these are happy living in a pot until you're ready to plant them in whatever final location you want them in. I plant these about 4 inches deep or so, and I plant several to a pot. If you're planting them directly in the garden, you might space them 2 to 3 inches apart, but they are better in clump, but no planting these in onesies and twosies. Another one of my favorite bulbs is pineapple lily, which is Eucomis. And Eucomis is native to southern Africa, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of what kind of climate it wants to live in. But what you get with it is these big, bold leaves, and I think the foliage on these is absolutely gorgeous. It almost looks a little bit succulent. And they are available in a variety of colors, but primarily greens and purples. I think the purples are particularly wonderful. And so the foliage is beautiful in and of itself, and I think the foliage makes a really nice accent in the garden. But then you get these really cool flowers, which do look a little bit like pineapples, hence the name pineapple lily. And of course, because they are native to Africa, they are not hardy in the ground here, but they are long-lived. So you can easily dig these up and store these. And actually, one way to grow these that's kind of interesting is to just sink a pot somewhere, keep them in a pot, that way you can pull the pot up, or to grow them in pots, because they do extraordinarily well in pots because they have that nice warm root zone, and really good drainage in those pots. And so they really thrive in that kind of condition, which is a little bit like home to them. So I start Eucomis as early as I possibly can. As soon as you can get your hands on the bulbs, you can start them because they do take a long time to flower. And if you start them too late, you might not get them to flower at all. So once again, this is another thing that I start in pots, and I think Eucomis looks best when there are multiples, again, multiples planted together. If you have just one, it doesn't really give that much of a show. So I actually usually plant 3 bulbs together. You can also plant the bulbs individually, and then when you plant them out, you can cluster them at that time. And overwintering them is dead simple. If I'm growing them in a pot, I just bring the whole pot inside and put it in my cold, dark storage area with my dahlias. If you've grown them in the ground, you can dig them up and you can put them in a paper bag and do that same kind of 55 degrees and dark type of storage. They don't ask for much. They just ask for some time to get going. And there are other little quirky bulbs that you can plant as well. Iron Cross Shamrock is a highly decorative version of Oxalis that has green edges, but this sort of dark purplish throat to them, or the inside of each petal is. You might think of this as 4-leaf clover, but it's Oxalis. This one in particular seems to be quite sensitive to drainage, so you definitely don't want to put this in anywhere that's too wet, and you probably can't go wrong by actually making that soil really well draining with it. You only need to plant these about 1 inch or 2 deep, and you can plant a lot of them in a small area so you get a really nice big show in there. And again, these won't be hardy, but you can absolutely bring these in and keep growing these throughout the year. They're tiny little bulbs, but they look just like the bulbs that you're used to, so you shouldn't have any problem figuring out which direction they go, pointy end up. And I'm really just scratching the surface on these amazing bulbs and corms that you can plant in spring. Things like tuberose and freesia. These are things that we probably know from boutonnieres, but they're so beautiful. They're gorgeous plants in your garden, and they have lovely scent on them. And these are all grown from bulbs, which means they're inexpensive and easy to plant. And I have just scratched the surface on the really cool bulbs that you can plant in spring. So don't sleep on bulbs for spring. I know we are programmed to think about fall bulbs, but there is a whole world of really cool, easy to grow plants that you can add to your garden, and they all come in just a little bulb. So let me know in the comments, do you plant spring bulbs, and which ones are your favorite? Are there some that I should try that I haven't yet? And a big thank you to Flowerbulb.eu for partnering with me on this video. They don't sell anything, they're just a source of inspiration and education about all things bulb related, including spring bulbs. So make sure you check them out, and have a great day in your garden. Go plant a bulb.